Hi, everyone, and welcome to another Woman in ESG Expert Talk, where we speak with inspiring women shaping the future of ESG and sustainable finance. I'm thrilled today to be joined by Wincel Kaufmann today. She's a global leader in sustainable finance, and Wincel has led the ESG strategy across the BlackRock global market. She's now the founder of blueColab. It's a mission-driven platform that helps scale the capital towards the climate solution and support the professionals transitioning into meaningful careers in sustainability. She's also preparing to launch her book, Real Returns. So let's dive in. Thank you, Winsor, for your time. We always start with the first question. So, what has led you into a career? You work at the intersection of the sustainable finance, the climate, and the impact. So, could you please take us in your journey?
Thank you, Sophie. I am so thrilled to be here. So thank you for inviting me. My journey into sustainable finance, it's actually not a straight line. So in university, I studied economics and I thought this is a little bit dull. Maybe I want to go a little bit into marketing. But in the end, I didn't get a job in marketing. The first job offer that I got was from a real estate company as an analyst. And so I was very eager to start. I took the job right away. I didn't know anything about real estate at that point, but it provided a lot of learning into funds, how they work, investing particularly in real estate. And that same job actually took me to many places. So I was born and raised in the Philippines. I was then moved to Singapore with that company. I worked in Hong Kong as well for 3 years, and then to London for 4 years, and then back to Singapore for the last 10 years. And I'm now in Switzerland. So going back to the point around that role as an analyst in real estate, at the beginning, I thought you have a career in business, and that's really to generate income and a career for yourself. And the piece around nature, I've always thought that it's something separate. It's something that you enjoy on a holiday outside your work, outside your normal business life. But then it changed in 2019 when I joined this big investment company. And at that time, that was the boom of ESG. So a lot of investors, a lot of businesses are talking about ESG, and it had its up and downs. And then you have the geopolitics that we now see today. It really comes in waves, the whole piece around sustainability. But what I find now is once you find that it's possible to have a career that has also purpose, so combining purpose and profit, I think that's something that you dedicate yourself and your work into because you see that it's something important. It's no longer enough to just generate returns for companies and also for individuals.
Could you also provide us some more color to how sustainability has been integrated into the investment because you have worked across the globe? What can the global investors actually learn from Asians that are very market led and opportunity driven?
Yeah, so I think there is an impression that in order to be sustainable, you need to sacrifice returns or you need to sacrifice profits. But actually, the way to think about it is that you focus around the sustainability aspects that really drive business, that generate value, good financial returns with good social outcomes. So, for example, there a lot of the funds of the world's biggest investors actually invest in the energy transition. And the energy transition means we're moving away from fossil fuels and we're investing in cleaner types of energy. So it could be solar, it could be wind, it could be investing in infrastructure for electric vehicles. It could be electric vehicles themselves that plug back into the energy systems. Also upgrading the grids because then we need to support the grids with this demand for energy. And so if you think about AI as well, for example, it consumes quite a huge amount of energy. And so ideally we want renewables to be the ones powering this new demand of energy that AI requires. And so this energy transition, it's not a debate whether you believe in climate or not, whatever your personal values are, it's just an economic trend. There's good economic value from investing in renewables and in the energy transition. And so I think that's what many investors are looking for because you just want to look at what are the returns. And now you want to make sure as well that number one, it's not doing any harm. And actually, if it's doing something good, then it's even better. And I think a lot of the Asian investors, I think there's a common misconception that Asian investors are not aware of this. In fact, the biggest investors, the most mature investors, the sovereign wealth funds of Singapore, pension funds in Japan, and pension funds in Australia, they're all integrating sustainability into their portfolio. And also, they're very, very much aware that they want to make sure that they are responsible investors because they also serve the people who are benefiting from their funds. And so Europe is very much leading the thought leadership on energy transition and sustainability as a whole. But I think a lot of the very mature Asian markets are also doing the same.
Great insight again, Wincel. Thank you so much to have also that view of Asia. I if just recall what you just said. So basically, they're actually seeing sustainability as an opportunity instead of compliance driven. Because in Europe, it's very compliance driven, and that's why we have to do it. While in Asia, it's more like purpose driven. So, what do you think that has actually been driving that shift? Is that because of the competitive advantage, or is there something else?
I think really it's both. So, both regions, any investor from anywhere in the world, you're really looking at very good financial returns, number one. And then number two, you want to make sure that those investments are not doing harm. And in fact, the next step is to make sure that they're doing something positive outcomes on top of that. So, when you talk about regulations, for example, I do agree that over the years, there's a lot of regulations now, especially in Europe. In Asia, there's a lot of new regulations now as well. A lot of them are following the standards that Europe has established. And I think it's not a bad thing. In fact, it's needed because you want to make sure that there's a standard that everybody is following and that we're speaking the same language. But essentially, having regulations is not going to solve climate issues, right? So there needs to be action on top of that. That's just something minimum that we need to make sure that there are clear actions that is put in place. Plus, from an investor point of view, we need to make sure that it's the ones that are really adding value to the assets because otherwise, it's just not something that's attractive for investors. So it needs to be both. It's just the beginning. It's not the end all or be all of sustainability.
Okay, I'm very happy to hear that because I agree and resonate that with you. So, could you tell me about the time that you work at BlackRock, where you integrate sustainability into the portfolio? So, what advice, as a former BlackRock global leader in sustainable investing, what advice would you give those beginners who are integrating ESG as a strategic lever for their portfolio? So, what would they have to think of?
Yeah, so really good question. I think the first thing you need to think of is one, look at your current portfolio or your current business and then see where you're exposed. So you need to dig a little bit deeper, not just look at the fund level or portfolio level. You want to see essentially which are you invested in and what are those companies doing and really spend time researching on what they're doing. So I think on that part, you will already discover a lot of things that you can judge whether according to your own ESG criteria or sustainability criteria, whether those are aligned with your company's principles, company's policies, and your own values if you're an individual investor. And then at the same time, I know that a lot of investors, especially a lot of family offices, when I speak to them, they always say it's not enough that we're screening for fossil fuels or we're screening for coal. What is the world doing towards the plastic problem? And so there's a lot of investors who want to see that we're actively looking at solving real issues in the world. And so there are a lot of companies and a lot of asset managers that are working towards this sector, which is a lot of decarbonization technologies, finding alternatives to plastic, energy efficiency in buildings, for example. There are companies providing mushroom instead of leather. And actually, they're already supplying a lot of the big companies today. And so there's really economic value that's attached to it. And those are the good examples, actually, that we want to see. And we want those good industries to grow even more.
Thanks for that insight. The question that I get as well from the investors is that don't have actually time to really research. They do research the data, but they really don't have time to engage with the company in order to really understand what they're doing. Like you said, you really have to spend time with the companies because in a portfolio you have different kind of companies and you don't really have time to really dive into it. What advice do you have as an expert of how to be more efficient and still do that little research that would actually help you with your investment decision?
Good question. I think as an individual, it's not just your job, it's also the job of your financial advisor. So when you go to your bank, you should ask your financial advisor and tell them that you do have an ESG criteria that you want them to apply in your portfolio, in your investments. So please do that. Not everybody does that. I see a lot of the banks in Switzerland are doing that now, proactively doing that. And so we want to see more and more banks all over the world doing the same thing. In addition to that, if you're a more bigger investor, more sophisticated investor, and you work with an asset manager, for example, it's their job to do that work for you and to report those for you. And even those companies with AI that's really available now, a lot of those information gathering, interpretation of the data, it's a lot of them, as you can imagine, are being automated now, and the amount of information is getting more and more efficient, and it's simpler, a lot simpler and faster to report back to clients and investors of those companies. I think it's something that people also don't realize how powerful they are, because if you don't consider yourself an investor, I can tell you are. All the money that goes into the economy. So you get a salary maybe from your employer, you pay money as taxes to the government. That tax is invested somewhere. You then also buy goods and services. That money is a signal to companies in terms of what your values are, in terms of what products you're buying. And then if you have savings or pension funds or portfolio with your bank or with a financial institution, they're invested somewhere else. And so it's good for you as an individual, as a consumer, as a taxpayer to be able to communicate what those sustainability values that you have, because those institutions are responsible to make sure that they cater to you as a customer, what your needs and your values are.
See, that is something people don't realize it. So thank you so much for sharing that as well. So moving forward with your mission-driven platform, the blueColab. So you've started this business. It's a platform that actually capitalizes for climate solutions. Now, you're doing this across the markets. Can you tell us about your challenges that you're facing, or what are the biggest gap, or even opportunities that you see? So we would love to hear more about that.
No, thank you for asking. And there are a lot to be done, as you can imagine. So the International Energy Agency says there's a 3 trillion gap every year to finance energy and sustainable solutions. And so the governments alone cannot do it. They also need the private sector to do it. And also, us in the private sector, we also need to be aware of what those are, because very little of those private sector funding also goes into sustainable investments, because they're in quote unquote a new asset class, right? So when technologies are emerging, a lot of the big institutional investors are kind of waiting for that industry to mature. So there's a big gap of funding in terms of making sure that those technologies actually develop and they reach scale that we need them to be. There's a lot of work. So one of the things I do at blueColab is to make sure that, one, the right investors are meeting the right companies that are focused around sustainable solutions plus equally profitable solutions. And number two, I am working as well on the education piece. So it's one, sharing this information, not just to young professionals and not just to students, but really everyone amongst us. Whether you're a business executive or a finance executive, not everyone is aware that sustainability goes beyond avoiding the use of plastic, for example. It's more around how do we actually consciously think about capital? because capital is not neutral. We don't think of it very often, but everything that we buy, everything that we spend on, they're a market signal in terms of what we really value and what is important to us.
I can't wait to hear more about Blue Collab. But apart from that, you're also writing your book as well, Real Returns. So tell me more about your book and what can we expect and why the title Real Returns?
Yeah, good question. So, Real Return, I got the title because I was an investor in real assets, and a lot of the energy transition falls under the category of real assets. Plus, I studied economics as well. So, we always talk about real economy. What is the effect on the real economy? So, these are the returns that provide both purpose and also profit. And the book really talks about the biggest opportunities in sustainable investing. It talks about the energy transition, it talks about climate, tech, and AI, talk about nature-based solutions. So it's focused around the opportunities. I wanted it to be really positive to talk about opportunities instead of only focusing around risks. So I hope this book provides guides to professionals, young professionals, mid professionals, and also even CEOs and CIOs of companies and funds. And I wanted it to be positive. I want everyone to see the opportunities that we have in front of us.
I have to say, I can't wait to read that book. So let us know when it's launched. We will definitely share that on our platform as well. So the last question will always end with asking an expert about their advice. So I would be very interested how you see actually the woman in shaping the next chapter of sustainable finance across the globe. So what advice would you give to the woman who aspire to lead with purpose in this space?
Oh, it's very exciting because actually there's a UBS report that says number one, there will be a huge wealth transfer from men to women. So women will hold most of the world's wealth. And that means that women will be controlling most of the world's wealth. And also, it says that when women invest, 71% of women actually align their sustainability criteria into their investments. And so I have huge hope and very excited about this part. And I'm very positive that the future will be in good hands with women.
Oh, wow. What a great closure for this expert talk. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that is very inspirational for every female leaders and listeners to this expert talk. And did they also say when?
Definitely in the next decades. I think this would you will see this generational transfer, generational wealth happening in the next decades.
So thank you, Winsor, for your time again. It was really appreciated that you took the time to really share your expertise. Please let us know when your book is launched, and we keep our listener posted about your book, and I can't wait to read it. Bye, Winsor.